Welcome to Tybalt's Apprentice. Today we're going to talk about Dihada, Bender of Wills. Actually, we're going to look at the Precon, which is Legends Legacy. The question I'd like you to answer in the comments below is, how many cards do you have to change in a Precon for it to no longer be a Precon? 5 cards, 10 cards, 15 cards? Is it always a Precon? As long as it's a Precon commander? Is it a Precon deck? Anyhow, the reason I'm talking about this is because I've been playing with it recently and I've been thrilled at how many times I've been able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat with this deck because of a few ETBs, and quite frankly, because of what I had forgotten or neglected or ignored, which is Dihada's second ability. Dihada, Bender of Wills' second ability to throw cards in the graveyard and create treasure tokens. That's really come up a lot to give me wins out of nowhere. Anyhow, one of the things I like about Dihada is the fact that very Lovecraftian vibe. She's a female demon that's able to change her form, though she has tentacles on the bottom and stuff. Kind of makes me think of maybe Wilbur Wheatley or from the Dunwich Horror, or maybe that chick from Wicked City, if you know that 90s anime. Actually, come to think of it, she's maybe more spider-like and more like Shieldred. Anyhow, I'm getting off the subject. Dihada is, and I've got notes here that I'm checking, so let's see here. Dihada's ability is to, or expertise is to corrupt people, enslaving them, manipulating creatures, and the fact that you have Mardu colors, you have access to red, black, and white. It gives you some cool abilities here. I'm not going to go through necessarily all the cards that I pulled out, but we are going to look at the cards I put in and talk a little bit about Commander Spellbook. That will be later in the video. Right now, let's just get to the cards that I put in the deck. I'm old, so I have to put my glasses on. Anyhow, if you've watched this channel at all, you know I'm a huge fan of Etherhub. And the fact that anytime I get a commander deck or any deck, first thing I do is look at the mana base and get rid of the tapped lands, because Etherhub's ability to give you a energy counter which can be spent right away to make the color that you need is just priceless. As I've said before, I've never pulled a land card and said, oh man, I'm glad this comes into play tapped. It just doesn't happen. The other thing that this deck was light on was mass removal. And so you're going to see a lot of those cards in here. Chroma's Vengeance is one of the cards. If I was smart or better at this, I'd probably be putting, I don't want to say richer because I waste money on these cards all the time, but Farewell would probably be a better option if you have that. Again, I kind of just grabbed the cards that I had available and threw them in here. With some thought, I should say. Consulate Crackdown, as a matter of fact, the sheer number of artifacts that are in and throughout the game now. Consulate Crackdown, when Crackdown enters the battlefield, exile all artifacts opponents control until that Crackdown leaves the battlefield. Again, it's an enchantment. Almost everybody's light on enchantment removal. Not everybody, but almost. Very useful card to have in there. Crux of Fate. You can see where I'm going with the removal stuff. Crux of Fate, being able to destroy all dragons or all non-dragons. Definitely a winner in here. It definitely helped me out. Crystal Ball, just having a idea of what's coming up next, being able to scry for that, does make a difference. Crumbling Visage, this goes back to the same argument with the Ether Hub. Again, I've never pulled a land and said, I'm glad this comes into play tapped. Just doesn't happen. Isolated Watchtower is another one that I threw in here. If you're behind on land, it just kind of gives you a chance to kind of catch up a little bit. For Phyrexian Rebirth seems appropriate considering where the meta is heading these days, as well as the sets that are coming out. Anyhow, Phyrexian Rebirth, Planetary Outburst is another one. Again, there might be some cheaper things like Wrath of God and so on. These were the cards I had in hand and just threw in there. And so this is probably the weakest of the inclusions, and this one is Leyline of Combustion. If Leyline of Combustion is in your opening hand, you can start it on the battlefield. Whenever you, or at least one permanent you control, becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Leyline does 2 damage to that player. A lot of these games come down to mid-range games. Depends on what you're playing in Commander as to how that works out. But a lot of times it's just a matter of a couple of life points that makes all the difference, all the swing in this. So, getting more mana on the field, Myriad Landscape. If you have to play a tapped land, I'd rather be able to get more mana on the field quicker. Myriad Landscape. Relic of the Legends. Another one that's going to take advantage of the legendary cards that you have in here. Giving 1 mana of any color, as well as being able to tap a legend to get a mana of any color. It has that colon in there, so it's going to be an activated ability that you can do anytime. Just seemed like it was value and seemed like it was worth it. Reckless Impulse, I swear I probably only put this in there because I had a foil version of it. So that's probably my excuse. I did take out some of the other card draw that was in there. So I figured I would put Reckless Impulse in. Wall of Reverence. Like I said, a lot of times the life total does matter. And so the fact that I can get mana, or rather get life equal to the power of target creature you control at the end of every turn, does make a difference, or can make a difference. The final one is a land, Vesuvia, and it can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any land on the battlefield, not just yours. So if your opponents have some sort of massive mana battery on their side, some kind of land that's doing some shenanigans, you should be able to tap into that too. So those are the cards that I threw in there right away. What I did now, we'll talk about with the Commander Spellbook. Mitch talked about this recently on his podcast on the Commander's Quarters. And also, another friend brought this up to me and suggested that I look into using it. And so I did here. So we're going to take a look at what happens when I plugged this deck in to see what was in there. This deck is a good deck, but it's not a good deck for beginners necessarily. There are a lot of triggers and a lot of things to keep in mind when using this deck. So there's a lot of things for new players might be overwhelmed by. So I think that the fact is that this would be good for I won't say a seasoned player. This definitely isn't CEDH, at least not the build that I have. But I'm finding it, I'm not going to say I'm finding it hard, but I definitely had a bias to using Legends just because I was there when they were first printed. Basically because the rules were so confusing with them. There was a time when you could play a legend to kill another legend that was on the field. So many cards these days ignore the legendary rules, so I just kind of got out of the habit of using them. Now I'm starting to see them more. Now I'm playing them in this deck and using them more because it's the Commander format. You can only have one of any card in the deck anyhow. So Legends seem like a natural fit, but they do have a lot of triggers and enter the battlefield effects that you have to keep track of. So keep that in mind for a newer player. These next few cards I'm going to look at that I took out of there, or I'm going to take These cards I'm looking at taking out right now are based on suggestions that were made when the guys at the Command Zone were looking at this when there's a new deck coming out. And a lot of their things made sense. And so the cards I'm removing from the deck, in addition to the ones I've already removed, are Day of Destiny. This doesn't really rely on a lot of legendary creatures attacking. It's more their enter the battlefield effects and so on. So I'm not finding a massive army of legendary creatures that are running over people. So that 4 mana could probably be spent better elsewhere. Just Ves Lich Knight. Interesting card, great text on there, super powerful ability, but it takes 10 mana to get any value out of it. Dihada's secondary ability can get you that extra mana that you would need, but all in all, I'd rather have another 4-drop that had a better effect when it entered the battlefield than relying on trying to get a bunch of mana and spending it on that same turn. Karazev, the Skyship Raider, 2 mana for a legendary creature. I just feel like there's something else that would go in there better. As a matter of fact, when we look at that spell book, we can find a couple of cards that would go in here and make a little bit more sense. Tajik Blade of the Legion, again, doesn't really seem to make sense in here. It's great that it's a legendary and it's indestructible, but the fact that it needs 2 other creatures to attack to get that benefit just seems like there's a better card that could go in there. The other thing is the Circle of Loyalty, and while that has several abilities that are cool, the fact is I think I'd rather have a Teleportation Circle. Cash in again on those ETBs. Some cards that were suggested by the Commander Spellbook to get some infinite loops in there would be Master of Cruelties, Microsynth Lattice, Crackdown Consulate, Aggravated Assault, Hellkite Charger, Gideon Martial Paragon, and Lita Mechanical Engineer. All cards that go in there. Some of those are a little bit more expensive. I think the ones that I'm going to go with are some of the more budget-friendly options here. All of these are going to give me some infinite combos that I can help close out the games even faster. All in all, this is a phenomenal deck and a fun one straight out of the box. These improvements that I've made have been improvements, just that, they've been improvements. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to say thank you very much for those of you that are still here at the end. Thanks for taking the time to watch, like, comment, and subscribe. Look forward to talking to you again soon.